Hello, everybody. Welcome to another SORSE session. I'm your host, Terry Forey. It is March the 9th, hopefully you all know that. Just before we start, I've got a few announcements to do. So we have some more events coming up. So we've got a sort of interesting panel session tomorrow about an EU SSI idea. We've got a series of talks on March the 16th. On the 17th, we have a workshop that actually runs over onto the 18th as well. It's sort of split up into two sessions. So do feel free to come along to any of those events. This is our very last month of running SORSE. So we have got a finale event, which I think has been scheduled roughly for the 24th. I haven't put it on here, this slide yet, just in case that date changes. It hasn't yet been announced, but do keep an eye out for it. I think it will be announced in the next day or two. And yeah, come along and say your goodbyes. It's been a great event and we hope to see you there. But today we have a software demo. We have a software demo from Jurriaan Spaaks, Carlos Martinez-Ortiz, and Faruk Diblen, or I think Jurriaan's going to be doing most of the talking. And this is all about how fair is your research software. We do have a code of conduct that I'd ask everybody to follow, please. And just so you know, we are recording this event. The recording is actually already started. We will, if you do not wish to appear in the recording, please keep your video off and your microphone muted. Don't worry, the chat before we started will not be appearing in the recording. And the contents of the Zoom chat is also is not recorded. So feel free to ask any questions in there if you don't want to appear in the recording. So that is everything I have to say, at which point I will stop sharing. I will let Jurriaan set up his screen share and we will begin. And thank you everybody for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Let me see if I can do the same trick as before. And then you should now see my presentation, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay, good, yes. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Jurriaan Spaaks. I'm a research software engineer for the Netherlands Eastside Center. And I wanted to talk a little bit about two tools that we have been developing called FairTally and howfairis. And they can be used to measure, well, give a proxy of how fair your research software is. So as I said, I work for the Netherlands Eastside Center. We are about 70 people now, 70 research software engineers. So here's a picture of the team that we took during the outing 2 years ago, I think. And we try to work with all of research in the Netherlands. So here's a picture of all our partners from 2017. So it's a little bit older slide, but just to give you an impression. And that gives us sort of a unique position because because we can have this overview of what best practices are, what is useful, what would be used if you propose it, what is realistic, all of those things. And so that's in fact what we did. About a year and a half ago, we launched a website with 5 recommendations for fair software. And that you can see that on fairsoftware.eu or fairsoftware.nl, which is the same website. But that essentially recommends using or following these 5 aspects. So it says that you should develop research software in repositories that are publicly accessible from the start of the project. That you should put a license on it so that people can actually make copies of what you made. That you should put your or publish your code in community registries like bio.tools, for instance, or ASCL.net for astrophysics code, for example. And many domains have these kinds of registries. You have to search a little bit sometimes, but it's just as a way of advertising what problem your code solves. These registries can really help because typically the items in it are better ranked in search engines than, for instance, just a repo on GitHub. So that helps really with the discovery of a tool. So the fourth item is that you should make your code citable, and there's two aspects to that. So first, you make sure that you have the right citation data. So for instance, who should be attributed with authorship. What is the title of software, because that's sometimes also not clear. And then the other aspect is that you, if you want to do everything right, then you should make snapshots of your code, of your repository, and store them with, for instance, a service like Zenodo, so that you can archive that specific snapshot, and you get a persistent identifier, so that in let's say 10 years time, if people are interested in running that code that you did today, they can run the exact same software. And then finally, the sort of catch-all recommendation is to follow some kind of checklist, and it can essentially be any checklist. There are many checklists out there. So for instance, there's a core infrastructures initiative checklist, which is quite elaborate. But yeah, if your project is just a prototype, then you can also just say, come up with your own 5 or 10 things that you care about for your specific needs. And then you can just follow those while you are developing your code. So those are the 5 recommendations that we put forward. And yeah, quickly after we presented that, we launched that website, we got actually quite a lot of endorsers. I think there's like 15 organizations now that have endorsed it, including NWO, which is a big research funder in the Netherlands. And we are now also using it in our own gold text. So we now ask that proposals sort of commit to using these recommendations in their development. So yeah, it's now kind of obligatory. So that's really nice. But then, sort of in retrospect, we were like, wait a minute, we have this 130 or so software projects that we've done over the last, let's say, 8 years, and we've put forward these 5 recommendations. But what is our own compliance with these 5 recommendations? We couldn't really tell. We didn't have a way to aggregate that data. So essentially, that problem breaks down into these 3 steps. First, you have to have an overview of what repositories you have developed, or where you have developed code. And for us, that's all of that's on GitHub, and all of that is open. But still, it's quite difficult to find that overview, because all these codes are developed in different GitHub organizations. So yeah, it's not one GitHub organization where the master list of all the repositories lives. So yeah, I imagine for other organizations, this could also be a little bit of a problem. But then let's say that you have this list, you can analyze each repository, and then you can sort of tally your compliance and ultimately make a report. So the first step is actually, for my organization, is already quite simple now. And that's because we have a thing called the Research Software Directory, which is a content management system where we keep track of our software output. And I actually gave a talk about that a couple of months ago in this channel. So if you're interested, you can look that up. But yeah, with that tool, it's quite easy to just via the API say, give me all the repositories that we've touched, or our engineers have touched. And then the second step is to analyze one of these repositories. And for that, we've created this tool called howfairis. Essentially, what it does is it visits your repo, it looks at the README, and then like 80% of the checks are just regular expressions, in particular on the badges that you can find there, like the ones that you see in the lower right corner, for instance. And then some problems you can't do via badges. So for instance, If you want to know if a certain file is there, like a citation metadata file is there, then you can do that via the API. For instance, for GitHub and for GitLab as well. And for a very small number of checks, we also used just the front end. Yeah, but that's 1 or 2 checks I think that we do. So the tool works for both GitHub and GitLab, and it works for Markdown and restructured text readmes. And I'll demo this in a second, by the way. But then the other tool is called howfairis, and howfairis is essentially doing many howfairis analyses. And because you're doing many and asking GitHub and GitLab many questions, you also need to use API keys so that you can have an increased rate limit. Essentially, you can ask GitHub more questions per time unit. And then we produce a report. Currently, that's an HTML as a single page app in Vue. And yeah, hopefully that with that report we can now inform ourselves and really quickly make an overview of all the work that we did and how compliant we are. Okay, so then it's demo time. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat.
Yeah, maybe you can read it. That's maybe a little easier for me.
Renato is asking whether you can use howfairis using self-hosted GitLab setups.
That's a good question. So self-hosted GitLab instances are currently not supported. And that may or may not change in the future. Yeah, it depends a little bit. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, let me see if I can hop over to here.
I would have a question. I mean, we can either do it at the end or now. Because you said self-hosted GitLabs are not supported. You fetch via HTTP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Because I was wondering, I mean, if I would have like if I would have the ability to get it from local files as well, then I could use it with CI also.
Yeah, so we have a GitHub action that you can enable for your repos. I imagine it's pretty easy to make that same thing for a GitLab runner. So if that's what you're interested in, that's definitely possible. If you're interested in running the tool on a local copy of code, it was sort of our choice to not try to support that because yeah, we're interested in resources that everybody can see, and I can see your local disk. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense to do the analysis there. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's try to install this tool, howfairis. Which was literally released a couple hours ago, I think, or at least the release that we're now going to look at. Okay, so this will give you, so you can install this from PyPy. There's also a Docker variant. If Faruk wants to say something, yes.
Yeah,
Go
can
ahead,
I ask a question?
Yeah.
What do I need to install this application?
So from what I'm showing now, it's Python. If you want to do the Docker install, you need some Docker tools as well. So yeah, pick your poison, I guess. I guess the Docker option is a little cleaner. At least if you remove that thing, then like everything is removed. And with Python, stuff might interfere with your existing installation.
So having Python 3.6 or higher, or Docker is enough.
Yeah, so we support all currently supported Python versions, or at least we test on all of these versions, and we also test on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So yeah, those should be supported. Of course, you can always have a little mishap, but okay. So let's first look at the help. So that's very simple. It's accessible. You can just read it and get what you need. So let's see. Let's do something simple. So here I have this repo on GitHub, which is a repo that we use for our live tests. So let's see what it does. So just the word howfairis and then the URL. And you can see that it has this breakdown in these 5 aspects. So for repository, you can see that it's an open repository. For license, it has some kind of license. And for those 2 aspects, there's only one check that you can do. So that immediately means that you are compliant or non-compliant. But for registry, there's of course many registries. So currently we support about 9 or so of them, at least that we do checks for. And this particular one has a PyPy badge. I can also show you what this repo looks like. I'm gonna move you a little bit, Faruk. There you go. So this is just sort of a dummy repo. It's not a tool that does anything. And also this README is just a collection of random badges that, I mean, each badge is real for a real project, but they don't go together. And also they don't describe whatever's in this repo. It's purely for testing purposes. But indeed, it said here that it was compliant with the PyPy badge. And yes, that's true because that PyPy badge is right here. So for citation, again, there's also a couple of ways in which you can be compliant with a citation. So in this README, you see that there is a Zenodo badge here. And that, I think it's for like MatchMS or something. It's like an unrelated project. Oh, self-hosted runners. Okay, it's just another project that we at some point did. But yeah, the fact that that badge is there, we then assume, or the tool assumes that you are not putting false information in your README. So we trust that the people are not gaming the system, so to speak. So if you have that badge, then we say, okay, this a piece of software is citable. And then finally, the checklist check. There's currently just one checklist check that you can do. And it checks for core infrastructures badge, which is this particular badge that you see here, which again is for an unrelated project. And the purpose is also not to have full compliance or show full compliance with whatever checklist you choose. It's just that you want to be transparent about sort of your values, what you care about. Is this just a prototype, or do you want to put this software on like a space rocket or something, and or like a medical instrument, and it has to be like super tight, like all the regulations. Okay, so then perhaps also interesting is that you can configure the tool a little bit. So let me see, I think it was show, yeah. Okay, so you can ask the howfairis tool for the default configuration, and then you can edit that a little bit. So if I make this file .howfairis.yaml, it gives you the default configuration, and by default all of this is commented out. But let's say that we want to skip the registry checks because, I don't know, maybe we have a different registry that the tool cannot check for. Then we can just say something like, I'm using my own checks. I'm using my own checks, my own registry. Yeah. Okay. And now we can use that file locally. So you can say something like --user config file name, and then that file that we just edited. And then again, that same live test repository. So if we run that, you can basically see that it skipped this whole registry category of checks, and you get the reason printed in the screen. That apparently you thought you didn't need this third of 5 checks. And then let's say that you're happy with this, then you can also just commit this file so if this file is present in your repo, it will automatically be picked up. I can show you an example of that as well. So for instance, we have one here. So this is just one directory in the repository. And it has this .howfairis.yaml configuration file with one reason in it for one category. And if I now say to howfairis, okay, howfairis, I wanna check out this repo again, but then using that specific path. So that's skipping and then one UU. Okay, so then it's automatically picking up that that part of the repo and it's treating, or yeah, that directory in fact, and treating it as if it is a repo on its own. And then you can actually see that you get that reason printed right there. So that way you can give users a little bit of control because probably we won't be able to support every little corner case that people might care about. And this way they can still get sort of the correct compliance that they think they need. Okay, so now basically with this you can do analysis of one repo. So I've showed you how it works on GitHub, but it's essentially the same on GitLab. So now let's see if we can make a little report. So we can do that with that other tool that I showed you, Fairtally. Oh, that's the issues. Here. So this is really super fresh. It's like really 0.10. So let's see what happens if we try to install it. Fairtally. Okay. Oh, 5 minutes. Okay. Right. So that also gives you a command line version. Okay, so that's accurate, and it also has this help, same as the other tool. It's a little bit simpler. Essentially, what you can give it is a list of URLs, and it just so happens that I have this list from my research software directory, and yeah, it's kind of long. So so let's so this has 130 or so repositories in it. So here I'm just taking the 10 last ones and I'm putting that in a new file, myfile.txt. So if I do got my file, then you get just sort of 10 random samples from repositories that my organization worked on. And then with that, Fairtally, you can do input file and then give it that file. And oh, I forgot to do one thing. So now that that I have these 10 repos, I will be making quite many requests to the GitHub API and perhaps also the GitLab. No, they're all GitHub repos. But it means that I have to enable these environment variables, so I can have these API keys for increased rate limits. So I also have those. I'm not going to show you my secrets, but essentially what it does is you can make this environment variable if you say something like API key GitHub, and then equals your GitHub name, and then the key that you get from GitHub, which is a little bit like this, or for GitLab, it would be something like API key GitLab equals again your username, but then on GitLab, of course, and then a colon, and then those keys look a little bit different. I think they look more like that. But yeah, so I have those from my secrets file. And if I now do this, I should not run into problems with rate limiting. So you can see that it is iterating over these 10 repositories that I gave it. And then it should produce a little report in HTML. Yeah, so it says I wrote these results to tally.html. So if I now do Firefox and then tally HTML, and then I have to switch desktops. Yes, so here it is. If I can find my mouse. There we go. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Right, so here you have these 10 repositories with the 5. These 5 columns are the 5 measures of fairsoftware.nl, the counts, and the resulting badge as well. And you can do like simple operations like sorting and seeing which are compliant with registry, for instance. And because this list can get pretty long, you can also do simple filtering. So for instance, if you do something like that, you just start typing, it will give you whatever is still matching that search string. And if there were any errors, then they show up in these under these buttons right here, which might help you solve some problems that you encounter later. I see that it's almost time, so I think I'm going to end here. If there are any questions, then feel free to ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, any questions, feel free to stick your hand up, either in the video or using the icon, or put something in the chat. We'll give it a minute or two. Someone's typing.
Okay.
There's a question from Frank in the chat. Are the results cached someplace?
They are not. If you're talking about the fair tally results, that's just a file. Why do you ask?
That's because it might take a while to go through 120 repositories, and if you have an error in the middle,
right,
say you want to restart at that point. Yeah,
that's a good point. Currently, we are not doing that. I guess because we haven't had that problem yet. And so it takes about 7 or 8 minutes to go through 130 repos. But yeah, if you do have an error in the middle, then that can be annoying. So perhaps that's something that we should look into. Thanks.
Well, I would have like not a technical question, it's more like a meta question, if that is okay for you.
Absolutely.
Because I see lots, in quotes, lots of these tools like popping up left and right because, wow, 21st century, we need digitization, blah, blah, blah. It's surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. And everyone is currently like creating their own tools. For example, for license, I use the reuse tool from the Free Software Foundation Europe. And I don't know, do you think we should, in general, join forces somehow? I mean, to make like a really broad, I don't know, big mail or something, whatever, to the research community, because I think if we are not careful, we end up like with 16 standards, you know, like 15 tools. They're doing all the same in the end, mm-hmm. But you might fail one and pass the other just because of, I mean, you're doing it now with regex, whatever, because they have like a slightly different regex. And
yeah. So if we do end up with these 16 standards, I still think that's progress.
Yeah.
If an individual, I don't know, they pick one of these standards and try to adhere to that, probably they will do a better job than what I would have done without any of these 16 standards. It's a little bit like if you have to choose your code quality service, right? If you do Codacy, mm-hmm. or what's that other one? Well, there's like 15 or whatever of these platforms out there. And it doesn't really matter, at least not that I can see, which one you choose. It's just, as long as you choose one, it's fine. So I don't think there's a strict need to come up with one of these platforms. perhaps an argument could be that it's easier for communication, right? That if you maybe at a national level can, or perhaps at a funding agency, you can say, okay, you have to do this, be compliant with this one standard. Perhaps that could help, but I think you will have a tough job because from what we've seen in the variety of the projects that we run, is that the demands and also the skills for people are so different, right? If you ask somebody from the humanities to do certain things, or a person from HPC, the compliance will be very different, and also problems will be different. Like before the presentation started, we talked about things about privacy. If you're running a weather model, that's not really a concern, right? But for a humanities person, this is often the concern. So yeah, what you want to adhere to can completely depend on your circumstances. So I think it's difficult to unify. That's a long answer. My goodness.
Totally fine.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, no, maybe can I add something to that, because I think I think I agree with you in that maybe having one standard that fixes everything is not going to be the case. But Max has maybe a more interesting point, that at the same time we don't want to create 17 different tools that do 90% the same thing, right? We want to reuse as much as possible. So I think we are trying to identify other tools that do similar things and try to see how can we cooperate and how can we integrate, and how can we reuse some of the checks that we're doing, and maybe not re-implement the same checks, but say, okay, can we have maybe like a standard library of checks, and then for the humanities we pick checks A, B, and C, and for astronomy we do only X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So to share some part of the maybe the more fundamental checks that we're doing. And yeah, I think that's something that we have discussed. We would like to see to see implemented, and that's our long-term goal. So yes, I think there should be more collaboration in between all of these tools, and we're trying to do that. So if you know of one of those, you're the owner of one of those and want to integrate your tool with ours and see how we can cooperate, reach out to Faruk, and he will be more than happy to talk to you.
Yeah, maybe a first step before you integrate the tools themselves would be to kind of try to unify how users would actually specify stuff in their repository. So that maybe of the 16 actually work on your repository. That wouldn't be too bad. Would not be ideal, but it would be better than you have to optimize for 16. You have to specify maybe things multiple times in your repository so that everyone picks up the data.
Yeah, I guess the larger point is that you want to make it easier on people, right? Or if it's not easy, then it's almost a guarantee that it won't be adopted.
Yes.
Yeah, I fully agree. And this is very difficult to do as well.
I think I have a question, if that's okay. I was just wondering, are you going to expand the tool or in any way to sort of double check that people aren't misusing badges? I'm just thinking of your example there where you've got lots of badges which link to projects which are not actually associated with the repo that you're checking.
Yeah. My feeling is that it won't help if I do checks. Like if people who want to specifically game that system, they will find a way to game that system. For instance, people have suggested, like, should we try to follow these links back to Zenodo and then somehow guess if what we find on Zenodo is actually the same as what the repo is about? That can be quite tricky. Yeah. So I think in terms of implementation, it can give you many problems. If nothing else, maintenance problems. And it won't give you a lot more than just looking at the README, especially because it's such public information. If people put essentially if they're lying in their README about all the badges that they have, yeah, because it's so public, I don't think that will go down very well with engineering types. They will be all over you, I'm sure.
Yes, I think I'm probably asking from a background. I'm doing too much web development, so I've just learned to not trust any users anymore.
Yes, that's a different world. Yes, where we actually try to break what you built.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
I think if you want to cheat, you'll find a way to cheat.
People always will.
It is not something we can prevent, but it's all about being transparent and showing what you have in a transparent manner.
Yeah. Are there any more questions from anybody?
I would have another one. Maybe I didn't got it, but it might be in the checklist. When you're saying like how fair is, I've seen lots of research software at my institute where I would consider it's not fair because of some dependencies. I mean, I see lots of, we have in GitLab, and I see lots of like sub modules from previous work, which is not properly integrated. Obviously, the localized path for loading data, etc., /home/user /data, which is always in this repository. And if I would do like a how fair check, I would expect that it tells me like, hey, yeah, your software is public, and so, but basically nobody can use it without touching it. Is such a thing like in the checklist, or is it planned, or just for expanding? Not that it is an easy task.
I guess for us it's out of scope.
Okay.
Because fairness is a little bit vague in itself, especially for software. And even if it is clear, it's sort of a scale, right? It's not like you are completely fair or you're not at all fair. Usually it's somewhere in the middle. And I think if we can nudge researchers towards the middle using this tool, that's already a huge gain. So it's really a case of baby steps. You can't get to, let's say, full fairness, whatever that is, in one go for most research projects. It's just, I don't think it's practical.
Thank you. I think that's probably all we're going to have time for because it is already 22 and I think we said we'd do a half-hour session. So can I just say a massive thank you to Jurriaan for a great talk and great software demo. I will clap on behalf of everybody in the room.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for attending. I hope you enjoyed it. Do keep an eye out for our last few SORSE events that are happening in the next couple of weeks. And then do please, keep your ears peeled, if that is such a phrase, for the finale event, which I believe is going to be on the 24th of March.
All right. Interesting.
Yes, should be good. I think I'm speaking, but I don't know. But yeah, thank you so much.